Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to have a look at some cool text effects. Before we dive into it, let's have a look at some examples. To start it off, let's have a look at some standard glowy type text. Looks pretty straightforward, and it is, in a way, but you'll see in a moment. Next one up, candy text. I call this candy text because it looks like a very appetizing wine gum. That's probably the sweet tooth in me. And third one up, a type of 60s type effect, apart from the colors, but I really actually like this one. So what these have in common is that with all these text effects, there's a type of gradient going on from the center towards the outside. Now, typically, when you want to do a gradient with a text plus tool, right, you would go to the shading tab. You want to have the gradient on the outside, so you say, okay, I'll go to the second tab, enable the outline preset, increase the thickness, add a gradient. Oops, yeah, that's a gradient, but the direction, it's not going from the inside towards the outside. So can we fix that with the angle? No, not really. Mapping size, no, the size doesn't fix things. In essence, really, there is not an awful lot you can do about this. Of course, you can do it on a per word basis. Full image, no, nothing really works here. So what can we do? Right, and that's where this technique comes in. And to give a bit of a shout out here to Bryan Ray, I came across one of his blog posts. He's a very knowledgeable man, and he's talking about a little custom tool technique and to do some sort of type of gradient mapping, and he uses that for a totally different purpose. But I thought, okay, well, that's actually something that I can use for my type of purposes. And as some of you guys know, I'm quite a big fan of the custom particle tool, or the P-custom tool, but I was not that experienced with the custom tool. So so I started working on this, and I wanted to share this technique with you guys. Let's have a look at the high-level flow of this technique. So we've got a text we start with, and you can see here there's some softness going on around here. That is already a type of glow, right? That's basically done by the shading. And as you can see here, we introduced some of the, softness. And that basically leads to that. That's on the outside. On the inside, I didn't apply any softness, but you could do it, of course. But it tends to, lead to a blurry text itself. In any case, it depends on the type of effect you want to accomplish. And then with the P-custom tool, all of a sudden you got yourself a gradient around it. So how does it work? Well, we've got a gradient background, and that is basically the second input image to the custom tool. So essentially, we're mapping this gradient to this text based, and that's where the technique really comes into play, based on the brightness values of the pixels of the first input image. So the brighter the pixel is, the brightness determines on where it basically gets the value from the second input image to map it against it. Okay, sounds a bit difficult, but let me illustrate it by using a little tutorial composition. Let me put this in here and this in there, and obviously I practiced beforehand, and hopefully this will illustrate the example. But if you guys have got any questions, as per always, drop me a comment or something. What you can see here is that there's a certain brightness right here associated with it. The brightness here is displayed over here. It's 1. When you move the outside, right, you can see, okay, it's decreasing. And what the circle over here illustrates is, if you do this mapping correctly, it will basically read the value of this image, the second input image, based on the brightness. So the brighter the image is, or the input pixel, the more to the right this will go. So this basically corresponds to the coordinates of an image. So in a normal image, the coordinates are such that basically on the left-hand side, bottom left, you've got 0, 0, x equals 0 and y equals 0. On the right, you've got x equals 1, y equals 0. On the top right, 1, 1, and on the left, top left, 0, 1. Right? And basically all we're doing is basically saying, okay, use the brightness to get the value here. So this is really focused on the x value, right? So if the brightness is 1, and the x equals 1, so you're on the right hand side of the image. If you're, say, here, where there's no brightness at all, right, it's completely transparent, then it is 0. So you're completely on the left hand side, and if you're somewhere in the middle, you're somewhere in the middle. And that by itself will be utilized in the mapping. So if we now jump back to the example, you can see this illustrated. This is the input gradient on image input 2. And as you can see here, when the brightness value, right, say here, equals 1, it will get the black value here and pops it in there. If it is 0, then you're in the orange territory. If it's somewhere in the middle, in the amber. And that's basically how the mapping works. The brighter the value, the more on the right hand side of the gradient will be mapped onto it. The lower the value of the brightness, the more on the left hand side you'll be. And then if you combine that with a bit of animation, which is a bit slow at the moment because of all the rendering and everything, but then basically you get this effect, right? The mapping changes because the gradient changes, and then you get this really cool effect. Now, the actual expression that is being used is really, well, a bunch of expressions. So let's go to the channel tab and let's zoom into this. Oops, a bit much. You see it here. It's basically 4 times the same expression with only one bit being different. That's R for the red channel, G for the green channel, blue for the blue, and A for the alpha. So what we're doing is basically saying, okay, get the red channel value of input 2. If you're out of bounds of the image, then basically duplicate the last used, or the last red pixel. And then, and this is critical, to do that mapping, you normally have x, y, utilize basically the brightness of the pixel of image 1, right? And C1 is basically utilized to make it common between the different expressions. You can read up on it. I won't go into the detail. So C1 in the red expression refers to the brightness of the red channel. And similarly, in the green expression, it would refer to the green channel, right? So, but it's basically what it is. Read the brightness of the input pixel and use that for the X and Y mapping to get the appropriate color of the gradient, right? So if the pixel is fully bright 1, then it will read 1, 1, which is the top right of the gradient, which in this case is black. Again, the Y value doesn't really matter. I could have put in here 0 or 1 or a half. It doesn't matter because the gradient is the same on the Y-axis, right? So here to illustrate this, if I change this to 0, it's the same, or to 1, or to C1, doesn't really matter at all, right? And you copy the expression over, and then you're basically done. And then I use an alpha multiplier to fix some of these transparency things, add a glow, and a merge, and then basically you're done. Right? So let's quickly create a comp from scratch. Right, let's start with a new composition. Drop in the text plus tool, show that in viewport 1, add some lovely text, increase the size a bit, well actually change the font as well. I had something like Mayandra, if I pronounce it correctly, probably not, but hey ho. Let's go to the shading. We keep the white solid fill as is, just standard white. Next one, red outline, enable that preset, change the thickness, we're increasing it, change it to white, and increase the softness. And again, important to remember here, without softness this won't really work, the mapping, because all the pixel values, brightness values will be identical. Right, so here, oh, sorry, we set it at 80. Now we add in the custom tool. Show it in viewport 2. Of course, right now nothing is really changing at all because we're not doing anything with the values. Let's go to the channels tab and fix that. Get R2D C1, C1. I explained this before. Again, we're getting the data from the gradient we'll be creating, and using the brightness of the input of image 1 to do the mapping. So that in the green one as well. Change that to G, into the blue one, change that to B, and into the alpha one, and change that to A. Now, of course, nothing is happening right now because we don't have any input for image 2. So let's fix that by adding in a background tool, hooking that up into the image 2 input, and of course right now it's black because the background is black as well. So let's fix that by adding a gradient, and immediately you see what's going on here. And let's then start working with our gradient. I shall attempt to sort of recreate the one we had over here. It won't be exactly identical as such, but you know, I'll try to get as close as possible to this one. I think on this side I just had black. Then maybe around here I had a bit of amber. Then I had a transparent one, right? And a bit later on, a sort of reddish orangey type color. And then last one I'll make transparent again, and then we need to sort of change the position a bit, maybe something like this. And very importantly, because right now it doesn't look overly impressive, but what I did in the example as well is I changed the start and the end point of the gradient. So in this particular case I'm actually putting it a bit to the left, maybe something like this, and then we can really play with it a bit until we get something we like. Apologies for this. It's always a bit of tweaking before you get what you like. This seems fairly similar to what we had. Not completely, but of course we're not completely done yet. We're adding a alpha multiply, basically multiplying the RGB channels with the alpha channel. And then we add a soft glow, and that will do quite a bit to the look, and we need to work on it a bit. And again, you know, it is according to your own taste, but maybe something like this. And then finally a background tool. We pipe this in here so that it will create a merge. There we go. This looks fairly similar to what we had before in the original example. And now what we need to do is basically animate the text a bit. So I go back to the text tool, to the text tab, and I add a follower. Now I won't go into the detail as to how the follower exactly works. So I would urge you to, if you don't know how it works, to check the manual or check a few YouTube videos on it. But essentially, I need to go into the modifiers tab, go to the follower, add a delay between each character. So basically here it will animate from left to right, and it will be, if I set this to 4, there will be a 4-frame delay between the animation of each character. So then the animation itself, what I'll do is I'll change the character size. So I'll set here animate this, move forward by, I don't know, 20 frames or so, and set it to, say, 1.5. And as you can see here, it's not exactly 1.5 but 1.1, but it has to do with the timing and everything. And then set, I won't go into the detail, then go to frame 40 or so and set it back to 1. And again, it won't be exactly like that, but let's go then to the spline and show this, and show the animation, make it into a smooth animation, and then very simply add a ping pong, and then basically it will repeat the animation. And then I'll do a quick rendering, but I won't bore you with that, so I'll fast forward through it, and then I will give you the results. Right, I pre-rendered a few frames to give you a bit of an idea, and there you go. So lastly, let's have a look at that other example you saw at the start, the sort of stylish 60s type comp where you've got these lines radiating out of the center. Very, very similar to the previous example. Essentially here you've got a fully blurred out version of the text. On top of that, sorry, that snipping tool keeps popping up. And then we've got an instance of that text with the non-blurred version, which I merge then with the result of the blurred version. The blurred version will go into the custom tool and then merge the non-affected version on top of that. Now, the radiating lines here are done by using, again, a background with a mask. Now, the reason I'm using the mask is that I didn't want the inside of the text being affected by it. So let me just show that if I hit now Ctrl P to disable it temporarily, right? You see now the full gradient, but then it's starting from the inside as well, making everything incredibly blurry and, well, not really readable. So let's enable it again. That's the reason I do that. Now, of course, the lines are radiating. Reason is simple. That's because the offset has been animated. Right, so let's show that here, right, with this little expression, minus time divided by 20. So if you play this, right, you see what's happening. Basically, as the gradient is animating, the mapping will be animated, and then you have the result here. Now, that's basically it. There's one other thing I'm doing, is I want to avoid a certain artifact. So if you look at here at the direct outcome of the custom tool, and if I just skip forward a few frames, see it gets completely white. Now the reason is, if you now go back to the gradient, that the mapping of the pixels without any brightness values, i.e. everything really around the text, will be mapped to fully white pixel. Now there are multiple ways of dealing with this. You could of course have a mask here, as I did with the other side, but for whatever reason I had decided in this particular composition to fix it later on, right? After I have got this result, I merge it with the other text, right, as I do over here, but then I merge it again with a background, but then as this is treated as a foreground, I only take part of the foreground by applying a mask. Right? And that's the original blurred text. And basically that takes care of it. So it only applies it to where the blurred text is and nothing around it. And then you can see the original background coming through. The original background, this background. And then that's basically it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you've got any questions, as per always, drop me a line below. And if you like it, please do like the video, subscribe and all that. And see you guys next time. Cheers guys, bye.